I was 17 when I stood under the scorching sun of Mecca, and even today I can feel the heat of that day, as if it were on my skin. My heart was filled with purpose, pulsing with an energy I had never felt before, and my spirit was inflamed with a joy that seemed greater than myself. Every step I took up to that moment felt like an invisible thread leading me to the sacred ground, where millions of the faithful had walked before me, seeking closeness to God. I saw myself as part of this invisible chain of faith and devotion, eager, obedient, utterly convinced that this was where I belonged. There was something profoundly transformative about that feeling. It was as if every fiber of my being had been made for that moment, and the responsibility of honoring that path filled me with a mixture of awe and anticipation I could barely contain. From a very young age, my life was intrinsically linked to the practices of my faith. I repeated my prayers every day, at sunrise and sunset, almost mechanically, but with a heart full of respect. I grew up learning to value discipline and obedience, rigorously following everything my family expected of me. Islam for me was not just a religion. It was the breath that kept me alive, the blood that ran through my veins, the rhythm of our home, the beat that guided every decision. My name was Amina, but my mother affectionately called me Nurite, the Shining One, because I followed the rules without question, without friction, always striving to be the perfect daughter, the daughter who would cause no pain or disapproval. I wore my hijab with pride, fasted devoutly during Ramadan, and spoke only when necessary. I didn't participate in parties or trivial games, didn't raise my voice, and didn't even dream of the lightheartedness other girls my age experienced. The Hajj was the pinnacle of my existence, the most important moment of my life, and for years I waited for it. Years of saving, of silent conversations, and of restrained pleas to my father, waiting for the day he would say yes. When I finally heard his permission, I remember my trembling hands, the lump in my throat, and the tears that threatened to fall, not from fear, but from a deep emotion of honor and recognition. At 17, most girls were preoccupied with cell phones, makeup, or school crushes. I, on the other hand, was preparing for my pilgrimage, to please God, to be fully committed to my faith. I arrived in Saudi Arabia, accompanied by my aunt, my heart pounding with anticipation and reverence. What I found there was a sea of white robes, an ocean of devotion, a continuous flow of people moving in unison, circling the Kaba with an almost palpable reverence. Every gesture, every step, every whispered prayer seemed to carry a sacred weight. I felt simultaneously small and significant, aware that I was part of something infinitely greater than I could comprehend. My heart raced as my eyes first touched the black stone. It felt like my breath was disappearing and my chest tightening. I placed my hand on my heart and whispered, "Wa, Allah, accept this from me." In that instant, everything I knew of the outside world vanished, and my soul seemed to fluctuate between devotion, fear, and awe. I believed that every step I took on that sacred ground was being counted in heaven, that my dedication would be seen, appreciated, and rewarded. But something unexpected happened, something no one had explained to me, something that isn't talked about, not in books, not in lectures, not in the videos you watch to prepare. The experience I thought would be all light and connection turned into an ordeal that shook me to my foundations. Sometimes, even now, I wake in the middle of the night and for a moment feel transported back to that crowd, back to a place where I hoped to find God, but which left me shattered. Many think the hardest part was what happened to my body, but in truth, it was the silence, the disbelief, the feeling that everything I trusted had become uncertain. The sky above me seemed the same, but nothing below offered me security. I screamed inside, but no one seemed to hear, not even those praying beside me. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but the truth was slowly and painfully revealing itself. It was that day that something inside me began to unravel, and sometimes, it's when everything falls apart that we begin to see more clearly than ever. My story isn't told to elicit pity, nor to seek revenge or mercy. It's told to remind us that even in the darkest and most unexpected places, light can still find its way. Even in Mecca, even when faith seems to have wavered, even when the whole world seems silent, it's possible for hope to survive, to infiltrate, and to illuminate. It's possible for life to continue, transformed and deeper, with renewed faith, even after having known the abyss, even after everything, especially after everything I've been through. My name remains Amina. And that's exactly how I suddenly realized I'd lost everything I thought I knew, and at the same time, found something I could never have imagined. I grew up in a quiet town, surrounded by flat rooftops reflecting the sun and dusty streets where the scent of cumin and jasmine mingled with the warm wind. Every corner, every shop, every house seemed to tell stories of generations who valued faith above any material wealth. My father, Abdul Rahman, was a shopkeeper and spent long hours in his family's small fabric and spice shop, always hoping to secure a better future for his children. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, his lessons carried weight and truth. My mother, Selma, was the heart of our home. She devoted her days to caring for my younger siblings and keeping the house running with near-silent perfection. We had no luxury, no abundance, but we had faith, and for us, that meant everything. In the living room, hanging on the main wall, was a framed verse from the Quran, repeated in my mind so often that its words seemed to live within me. My prayer, my sacrifice, my life and my death are for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. It wasn't just a decorative phrase. It was the foundation of our existence. Every gesture, every choice, every thought was shaped by this silent certainty. As I grew older, I learned to hear these words with my heart, not just my ears. My father was a silent man, yet possessed an intense presence. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it was after prayer, or when he taught me something about the Prophet. He would place his firm hand on my head and say, "Amina, you must guard your heart. Your modesty is your shield. Your obedience is your honor." I believed him completely, as if every piece of advice were a compass pointing me in the right direction. My mother, on the other hand, was gentle yet firm. Her delicate hands taught me how to fold my hijab perfectly, how to perform wuju with devotion, and how to keep my eyes lowered from the world. At night, she would sit beside me and test me on the verses of the Quran. When I recited them correctly, she would kiss my forehead and say, "Inshallah, your voice will echo in Jannah." It was a discipline wrapped in affection, and her every gesture taught me to honor faith with every detail of life. At school, my routine was silent, almost invisible. I spoke only when necessary, answered questions, and kept my head down. I didn't seek attention. I didn't want to be noticed. All I wanted was approval, from my parents, from God, from any authority figure who could assure me I was on the right path. My dreams were different from other girls. I didn't long for weddings or trips. I didn't dream of parties or light laughter. I dreamed of the Kaba. At night, I would often close my eyes and imagine myself standing inside a ram, my hands raised, surrounded by thousands of people murmuring the same sacred words. I felt a mixture of frustration and ecstasy, frustration for not having yet reached that moment, ecstasy for knowing that this was where I wanted to be, that my soul was crying out for purification. My nightly prayers were always for one thing: please allow me to go on the Hajj before I die. Let me walk the same paths the Prophet walked. Let me leave a piece of my soul in Mecca. I never imagined my request would be granted so soon. When my father finally announced that I would accompany my aunt that year, I was speechless. My hands covered my mouth, and tears welled up in my eyes. The emotion was overwhelming. I felt honored, privileged, chosen in a way that seemed beyond human merit. We weren't wealthy, and every resource had been earned through collective sacrifice. My mother sold jewelry inherited from her mother, my father worked overtime at the store, and even my older brother gave up part of his savings so I could go. The entire family believed I was the most devout, the most deserving of this experience. For weeks, I immersed myself in intense preparation. I read all the rules, memorized all the duets, reviewed hadith related to the pilgrimage. I meticulously practiced every step, every gesture, every tying of the hijab, so that nothing would slip in front of the crowd. I fasted every Monday and Thursday, seeking spiritual purification, and asked forgiveness from anyone I might have hurt, even in the slightest way. Every detail mattered. Every gesture was a silent offering, a step toward what I believed to be the most sacred moment of my life. I packed my bags with an almost reverent slowness, each movement charged with intention. I carefully put on my white prayer gown, folded the small Quran I always carried with me, packed a cloth bag with dua cards, placed a bottle of Zamzam water my local mosque had given me, and finally, included a photograph of my family. Each object seemed to carry a story, a memory, a silent prayer. The night before the trip, my mother kissed me on the cheek, and in a soft but firm voice, said, "Remember, Amina, you are going to the house of Allah. Behave as if you are being watched by angels." I nodded, feeling each word like a promise engraved in my heart, a reminder that every gesture there should be pure and intentional. On the plane, still immersed in anticipation, I looked out the window and whispered almost inaudible blessings, asking that my trip be accepted and my sins washed away. I imagined myself circling the Kaba, tears streaming down my face in repentance and devotion, my heart light, my soul renewed. But in that dreamlike moment, I didn't know that my tears would later be shed for reasons I could never have imagined, reasons that stemmed not from spirituality, but from the unexpected, the painful, the human, and the cruel. Yet on that flight, my chest was filled with hope. I clutched my rosary, closed my eyes for a moment, and felt like the luckiest girl in the world, gazing at the white immensity of the clouds. We landed in Jeddah late in the evening. The warm, dense air seemed steeped in history, charged with a palpable spirituality that clung to my skin. Every breath reminded me that I was finally standing on soil that had filled my dreams since childhood. My heart pounded so hard it seemed to follow its own rhythm, as if the earth were welcoming me with each beat. My aunt and I mingled with the crowd, guided by signs and the distant echo of instructions, as everyone dressed in white walked with silent concentration toward something that seemed greater than any human comprehension. The bus ride to Mecca was long, but I couldn't sleep. I leaned my forehead against the window and watched the desert darkness, interrupted only by the headlights of the vehicles and the shy glow of moonlight on the sand. I whispered my duet softly the entire way, praying, "O Ella, grant acceptance to this journey. May my heart be pure. May my steps be guided." I asked forgiveness for any mistakes I might have made, no matter how small, for small silent acts known only to my conscience. Each whisper was a thread of hope, each heartbeat a reminder that I was there to surrender my soul, my life, my innermost desires to something greater than myself. We arrived just before dawn. The city felt alive in a way I had never experienced before. It wasn't the joyful, noisy hustle and bustle of my hometown, but a quiet, deep, almost sacred vitality. There was a palpable anticipation in the air, a collective energy of submission and devotion. Men and women from all corners of the world, with different faces and languages, walked together, united by a common goal, like rivers finally flowing into the sea. The feeling was overwhelming. I felt the presence of faith not only in each person, but in the very ground we walked on. As we settled into our temporary quarters, I felt the tension and excitement building. The first time I donned my prayer robes, I stood before the mirror and barely recognized myself. It wasn't just my appearance that changed, but the very essence of how I perceived myself. I was no longer just Amina, the obedient daughter, the silent student, the girl who followed rules without question. I was a pilgrim, someone walking for a purpose that transcended my understanding. My heart expanded with a mixture of humility and ecstasy, and a keen awareness that, finally, I was exactly where I needed to be. The next morning, we walked toward the Masjid al-Haram. The closer we got, the more I felt my body tremble, not from fear, but from a sense of awe that seemed to permeate every cell of my being. I tried to imagine what it would be like. I tried to prepare myself, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality. The Kaba stood before me, black and gold, motionless, yet emanating a silent, living force. My eyes burned with emotion, my legs weakened, and for a moment I stopped walking. People passed by, whispering prayers devoutly, tears streaming down their faces, but I remained there, absorbed, my chest heaving, letting the moment consume me. For the first time in years, I wept without reserve, a weeping that blended reverence, gratitude, and a complete surrender I had never felt before. Every prayer I had whispered throughout my life, every silent plea for forgiveness, every time I had doubted my own worth, it all seemed to converge in that instant. It was as if every fragment of my existence had been concentrated into a single moment, a single breath. We began to perform the tawaf, circling the Kaaba 7 times, following the continuous flow of thousands of feet and hearts beating in unison. I held my aunt's hand tightly, as if I could anchor myself in that sea of people, and my lips kept repeating words that had become reflections of my soul. Labek, Allahumma, Labek, here I am. A whisper that mingled with the voices of millions, yet felt uniquely mine, intimate, profound. O Allah, here I am. Every word carried my devotion, every syllable my repentance, every beat of my heart a complete surrender. In that crowd, I felt invisible, yet paradoxically visible, exposed in my entirety to the Creator. It was as if every layer of pride, vanity, or ego had been stripped away, leaving only my naked and sincere essence. There, we were all equal. Men, women, young, old, small, before the majesty of God, united by the same faith, by the same need for divine closeness. I pressed my hand against my chest to try to control my racing heart, but it was useless. My breath came in waves, my thoughts dancing between hope and reverence. During one of the rest breaks, I wandered off and sat alone in the prayer area. My aunt had gone off to cool off, and I felt strangely vulnerable, yet safe. I rested my forehead against the cool marble, feeling the smooth texture against my skin, and began whispering prayers I hadn't even remembered forgetting until then. I didn't ask for wealth, marriage, or success. I didn't ask for health or worldly comfort. I asked for something deeper, something that transcended any earthly desire. I asked for closeness. I asked to be known by God, to be embraced by Him, claimed by Him, feeling my every breath rise like a silent offering. The space around me was the most sacred I had ever known, but even in that sanctuary, something dark began to creep in. At that moment, I didn't understand that even in the most sacred places, shadows exist, that not every man dressed in white possesses purity of heart, that not every hand extended toward the Kaba is free from hidden intentions, that even in the city of prayer, there are hearts that remain uncompromising, impenetrable, and that evil can hide amidst apparent faith. If I had known what was about to happen, would I have gone back? Would I have stayed with my family, remained in the safety of my home, praying less boldly? I don't know. All I knew in that moment was that I was exactly where I always wanted to be, that each step brought me closer to what I had dreamed of since I was a girl. My eyes were swollen and red from crying, my throat dry from whispering dua so much, and yet I felt an intense peace, a quiet warmth radiating from the depths of my soul. But even in this state of spiritual ecstasy, something was about to change. During the tawaf, the crowd suddenly gathered. One moment I was beside my aunt, our hands clasped tightly, feeling the security and guidance she gave me. The next, someone moved between us, perhaps one man, perhaps two, and involuntarily, I let go of her. I called her name once, then again, but the mass of people drowned out my voice, as if the entire world had disappeared around me. Everyone moved forward, focused on their own rituals, and I let myself be carried along by the flow, trying to hold on, trying to find a safe place, an anchor. I didn't panic immediately. We had previously agreed on a meeting point in case something like that happened, and I tried to remain calm, following the flow of people, observing every detail with watchful eyes, every movement cautiously. Still, the feeling of vulnerability was growing, and my heart hammered in silent alert. Then he appeared. A man who looked religious, older, calm, dressed in white like everyone else, a well-trimmed beard, eyes that seemed kind and trusting. The trust I might have initially felt was immediate, and it was in that moment that my world began to change irreversibly. He spoke softly in Arabic. I could barely understand. I thought he was offering help, showing me the way back to where I needed to be. "Sister, don't worry. Come, I'll take you where the women wait." I hesitated, but there was something in his tone, an apparent paternal care, that made me trust him. I remember it clearly. I thought he had daughters. I thought he was trustworthy. We were in Mecca, I thought, in the holiest place on earth. No one could do harm here. He guided me, his hand hovering near my back without touching, leading me through the crowd, columns, and side passages. The sound of prayer faded, as if I were being transported to a place outside of time, and then I began to feel something I couldn't name, something wrong, but it was too late to speak, too late to go back. I won't describe the place or the moment, not because I don't remember, but because I remember it with details that burn into my memory. Some scars you carry forever, even if no one sees them. Your voice changes, your eyes change, and something inside you quietly breaks. What happened next didn't last long, but it stretched across my soul like an endless night. There were no screams, no cries for help. Only silence, only shame, only the terrible knowledge that I was alone, that no one would come. When it was over, I was paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't cry. My body trembled. My mouth closed. The world around me seemed blurry. I heard the adhan in the distance, sandals scraping against the tiles, but nothing seemed real. Somehow, I made it through the crowd. My aunt finally found me. My face was white as a sheet. She asked what had happened, and I simply said I was tired, overwhelmed, that I needed to lie down. She believed me. Everyone believed me, because I said nothing more, because I couldn't. How do you say the unthinkable in a place that should purify you? How do you tell someone that the very thing that should bring you closer to God has left you feeling forgotten by Him? That night, lying on a thin mattress, I stared at the ceiling and tried to pray. Every time I whispered Bismillah, my voice caught in my throat. I wanted to believe that Allah saw me, that He cared, that it wasn't my fault, but all I felt was silence, and I hated myself for it. I hated letting go of His hand. I hated following a stranger. I hated that my body had betrayed me, and worst of all, I hated that I was still alive. No one talks about this, not in sermons, not in lectures, not in books about the Hajj, but it happens. And now I know I'm not the only one. But back then, I felt completely alone, and in the most sacred place on earth, I'd never felt so lost. When we returned home, nothing seemed different, yet everything was different. The streets were the same, my brothers' voices filled the house as before, my mother went back to folding clothes, humming verses. My father returned to the shop, proud to tell his friends that his daughter had completed the Hajj, but I wasn't the same girl anymore. Something inside me had snapped, and no one could see it. Or maybe they saw it and pretended not to see it. I didn't know. I didn't sleep much after that. When I did, I woke up sweating, choking on my own breath. In my dreams, I was still in Mecca, trapped, voiceless, searching for someone who never turned around. The adhan echoed in my mind, not as a call, but as a warning. I would jolt awake, clutching my hand to my chest, trying to remember how to breathe. I started skipping meals, avoiding people, mirrors, even my mother's gaze. I told her I was tired from the trip, that I needed time alone. She would smile and say, "It's normal. Hajj humbles the heart. Allah is bringing you closer." But I didn't feel closer. I just felt empty. And worse, I was ashamed of feeling this way. In our culture, honor is everything. A girl's worth is measured in silence, obedience, and purity. If something happens and you speak up, it's your fault, not theirs. If you cry out loud, people will ask, "Why were you alone? Why didn't you scream? Why did you trust him?" I knew the questions before they were even asked, so I kept quiet. I wore silence like a second skin. It itched, it burned, but I told myself it was better than being blamed, rejected, worse. But silence didn't protect me from myself. I began to question where God was when it all happened. At first, I whispered softly, barely audible, then louder. "Where were you? Did you see me? Did you turn your face away? Wasn't I enough?" I opened the Quran, but the words seemed distant, speaking to someone else, someone intact, someone clean. I tried to pray as I had before, as my mother taught me, slowly, with my heart, but my mind was frozen. My forehead remained on the ground, too heavy, waiting for peace that never came. The silence pressed down on me, crushed me. At night, sitting in the dark, knees pressed to my chest, I simply talked to him. Not out loud, without formality. Just say it. If it's there, show me. Do something. Anything. Because I don't know who I am anymore. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even write. I just asked questions, desperate, afraid it would mean ingratitude. Or worse, a betrayal of my faith. Something deep inside me had changed, and I realized there was no way back to the girl who believed everything in life had meaning. That unshakable certainty I carried like armor had dissipated, shattered by what had happened in Mecca. It was as if a part of me had broken, but I didn't yet know what or how to rebuild it. So I began searching, silently and carefully, for answers that could ease the pain I carried. That night especially, I couldn't sleep a wink. The silence in the room mingled with the echoes of nightmares, and I feared waking my family with my sighs and suppressed tears. I grabbed my phone, put on my headphones, and prepared myself to at least try to escape what was squeezing my chest. At first, I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just wanted distraction, a small refuge from the pain that seemed to inhabit every corner of my being since returning from the Hajj. I opened YouTube, thinking of finding a recipe, a travel vlog, anything to occupy my mind. But Unexpectedly, I came across a video. The title was simple, direct. Former Muslim woman tells how she met Jesus. My finger hesitated on the screen, almost skipping ahead, but something stopped me. Perhaps it was the feeling that the story could, somehow, speak to me. I pressed play. The woman on the screen reminded me of myself, young, covered, soft-spoken, but with a glow of honesty so intense it seemed to bare her heart to the viewer. She spoke of her confusion, of the feeling of being lost in her own silence, of the pain and frustration of feeling invisible. Then she told how she found someone who truly saw her, and when she said, "I met Jesus, not the Jesus they taught me in school, just a prophet, nothing more," something inside me awakened. She spoke of a Jesus who listened, who healed, who sought out the broken by name. With each word, my heart pounded, as if that truth had been awaited within me for years. One video led to another, then another. Different faces, voices, cultures, different stories, but all with a common thread: pain, questions, and a deep peace I barely knew existed. And then, one night, I came across someone reading the Bible aloud. I hesitated. I'd always been taught that the Bible was corrupt, dangerous, unreliable, but still, I stayed. I heard the story of the woman caught in adultery. The religious leaders dragged her away, ready to judge, to punish. I held my breath, waiting for Jesus to agree, to condemn her, but he didn't. He bent down, wrote in the dirt, and when he looked up, he said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." One by one, they walked away, and he didn't humiliate her. He didn't ask what she had done. He simply said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." In that moment, I wept. I wept for her, and I wept for myself. For the first time, I could imagine a God who wouldn't turn away from me, who wouldn't see me merely as a disgrace, but as a daughter, a God who would kneel beside me, who would defend me, who would look me in the eye with tenderness and not with reproach. And in that instant, something began to blossom in my heart: hope, trust, and the feeling of finally, for the first time, being truly seen. After that night, something inside me stirred in a way I couldn't ignore. I began searching more seriously, even though I was afraid of what it might mean. I cleared my browser history with every click, put on my headphones so no one could hear, and watched the videos only when the house was quiet, immersed in the darkness of my family's sleep. Even then, I couldn't stop. The more I heard stories about Jesus, the more I felt a growing desire to truly know him, to understand how someone so holy could care for a broken person like me. It was a mixture of fear and hope, as if my heart were being pulled toward something I couldn't yet comprehend. Eventually, I found a Bible online. I remember the anxiety I felt before clicking. My hands trembled, and a pang of fear ran through my chest. What if I was wrong? What if those words showed me truths I couldn't bear? Still, something inside me urged me to open it. I started with the Gospel of John, and read those words I will never forget. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." These phrases began to inhabit my thoughts constantly. During the day, I felt their echo in my mind. At night, they enveloped me like an invisible blanket. Unlike anything I had read before, those words were neither authoritative nor harsh. They were gentle. Gentle in a way that seemed to speak directly to my heart, acknowledging my pain without judgment. Night after night, I would read another passage, sitting in my room, the low light illuminating the Bible in my lap, while the Quran sat quietly on the shelf. My fear still lingered, but it didn't stop me from continuing. There was something happening inside me, a silent pull, a shift I couldn't name. I began to pray again, but in a different way than before. I didn't recite the formulas my mind knew. I simply whispered, with sincerity and vulnerability, "Jesus, are you real? Were you with me when I suffered? Do you see me now? If you are who they say you are, show yourself to me." I didn't hear a response, but something began to shift inside me. For the first time since that day in Mecca, I didn't feel completely alone. My heart opened, still wounded, still hesitant, but with a spark of hope. I remember that night clearly. I cried myself to sleep, my pillow soaked with tears, each sob carrying the shame, silence, and confusion I had buried so deeply. The most striking thing was that my prayers were now so sincere that it didn't matter whether I was speaking to Allah, the ceiling of my room, or the Jesus I had just met. Something inside me knew he was there, watching, welcoming, holding my pain. That night, something changed. And then the dream came. I walked alone through a vast, silent desert, the sand stretching endlessly to the horizon. The sky was gray, heavy, and though I expected warmth, I felt cold in my bones. Each step was harder than the last, and my soul carried the weight of what I was trying to forget. Suddenly, he appeared, a man in a white robe, his presence glowing softly like light at dawn. He stood beside a well and said nothing. He just stared. But those eyes held a warmth no human being had ever offered. Not my teachers, not my family. They saw every part of me, without fear, without judgment. I fell to my knees, tears streaming, ashamed and relieved at the same time, feeling for the first time that there was someone who truly saw me. He didn't say a single word aloud, but it seemed he could hear my every thought, every shred of guilt, every hidden wound, every fear I carried. Then, slowly, he walked toward me and knelt beside me, just as I had read in Scripture, when Jesus bent down beside the accused woman, shielding her from the condemnation everyone around seemed ready to impose. I realized in that instant that I was that woman, not by choice, but because my pain and suffering had placed me there. He didn't accuse me. He didn't ask uncomfortable questions. He didn't pressure me. With a gentleness that seemed to break the weight I'd carried for years, he simply said, "I'm with you. I always have been. You're my daughter." The simplicity and certainty of those words penetrated my heart in a way nothing else had. There was no shame, no rebuke. I was called daughter. For the first time, I felt someone truly saw me and accepted me exactly as I was. I woke gasping, tears streaming down my face, but this time, they were tears of relief, not fear. A quiet, almost palpable peace spread across my chest, like a warm blanket enveloping every inch of my heart. Nothing around me had changed. My room was still dark, silent as always, but something inside me had been transformed. For the first time, I didn't feel dirty. For the first time, I felt genuinely loved. The following days were like an internal storm, filled with silent waves of memories, fear, and hope. I couldn't get his face out of my mind, the gentleness in his presence, the warmth emanating from his eyes in the dream. Each memory haunted my mind, but in a way that healed, not hurt. I returned to my Bible, the one I had so carefully hidden, and began to leaf through the verses I had, until then, barely understood, but something in each word spoke directly to my heart. Each passage seemed to whisper comfort to wounds I had never dared share with anyone. Yet the reality of the world around me, of my family and my culture, pressed upon me with every page I read. What would they do if they found out? How would my mother react? My father? My siblings? I grew up believing that leaving Islam would be the greatest betrayal possible, a shame that could cost me relationships, acceptance, perhaps even security. Fear gripped my chest like an invisible, suffocating fist. Even so, that voice from the dream, so real, so firm, continued to echo, "You are my daughter." One night, I finally couldn't bear the internal torment anymore. I closed the bedroom door, turned off the light, knelt beside the bed, and with a trembling voice whispered, "Jesus, if you are truly who you say you are, if you are truly the Son of God, the Savior, I need you. I can't go on alone anymore. I accept you. Please save me." In that instant, something opened inside me. The tears came hard, fast, unstoppable. My hands trembled as they covered my face, but this time it wasn't the pain that broke me. It was the relief that freed me. The weight I'd carried for so long began to dissipate, layer by layer, leaving room for something I'd never felt before. Warmth, light, life, a deep, silent, inexplicable peace spread through me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was loved. I still didn't know what the path ahead would be like. Fear and uncertainty continued to lurk in the corners of my life, but something had irreversibly changed. I took a bold, courageous, definitive step. In return, I received something infinitely more powerful than any fear. I found true, eternal, and unconditional love. But my secret couldn't stay hidden forever. One day, my younger brother found the Bible I was trying to protect. He didn't say anything right away, but his look was enough to make me realize something had changed. The fear returned for a moment, but the peace that had begun to blossom within me was stronger. I was no longer alone. A few days later, Rumors began to spread like wildfire in the house. My mother began to watch my every move, always suspicious of my long hours alone in my room. My father began to regard me with a different coldness, almost calculating, as if he were measuring my every gesture, searching for proof. The atmosphere in the house became tense, fraught with suspicion and a heavy silence. Until one night, after dinner, they finally confronted me. They found the hidden Bible, the videos I'd watched, my notes, every word I'd dared to write about Jesus and my nascent faith. My silence, trembling and hesitant, was the confirmation they needed. What followed was devastating. Screams, tears, accusations hurled like sharp arrows. My mother wept as if someone had died, sobs piercing the heavy air of the room. My father, in turn, screamed words I never imagined I would hear. "You have dishonored us. You are no longer my daughter." My brothers didn't dare look in my direction. I was no longer the sister they knew. I was now a traitor, a walking shame to the faith and the family name. My phone was taken, my belongings searched, and every corner of the house felt like a silent tribunal, watching and judging my every move. Locked in my room, I heard terrifying whispers about arranged marriage, threats of expulsion, rumors of corrective measures that would make me regret everything. Fear suffocated me. It seemed every shadow held a threat. That night, my only escape was through the small bedroom window. I took only what I could carry, a backpack with the essentials and the clothes on my back. The streets were silent, the darkness profound, and the air sharp, but I kept walking, step by step, without looking back. Every beat of my heart was a mix of terror and hope, every breath a silent prayer that I might find a safe haven. That's how I found an underground network of believers I'd only known online. A kind, patient Christian woman welcomed me as if she'd known me forever. She offered me a warm blanket, water, and soothing words. "You're safe now. No one can hurt you here." There, for the first time since I began following Jesus, I felt truly safe. Following Christ had cost me everything: my family, my home, my old world. But I had found my soul. The first few days were painful. Despite the physical safety, my heart was broken. Memories of rejection, emotional abuse, loneliness, and fear haunted me at every step. But then, something unexpected began to happen: the love of strangers. The woman who welcomed me introduced me to a small house church. They didn't demand explanations, proof, or justification. They simply opened their arms and welcomed me. They prayed with me, cried with me, held my hands, and showed me that there was a community where I could be myself, without masks, without fear. She connected me with a kind pastor and his wife, who introduced me to Christian counseling. At first, I hesitated. My trust had been shattered so many times that any attempt to reach out seemed impossible. But gradually, the sessions became a sacred place. There, finally, I could talk about the pain, betrayal, and confusion I'd carried for years. No one rushed me. No one judged me. There was only quiet compassion, a patience that let me breathe. One night, during prayer, the pastor looked at me with quiet intensity and said, "You are not dirty. You are not damaged. You are loved." These words broke something inside me. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to carry the weight of everything I'd experienced alone. A new feeling began to grow: hope, courage, the sense that my story could have a purpose. So I began recording my life, my struggles, and my victories. At first, it was just for me, to organize my memories and face the inner chaos. But little by little, I realized that my testimony could also be a light for others who feel lost and hopeless. Over time, I began sharing bits of my testimony in small gatherings and intimate circles. Initially, I was terrified, whispering my words like someone holding a precious secret. But as I shared my story, I realized I wasn't alone. I met other survivors of profound trauma, sincere seekers of truth, young people who, like me, carried silent pain and hearts full of questions. Some were former Muslims, who had also encountered Christ in surprising ways. Hearing their stories gave me courage, and incredibly, my words began to bring hope to them. The peace I so desperately sought didn't arrive suddenly. It came slowly, like the sunrise after a dark night, gently illuminating every piece of the wounded heart I still carried. I started laughing again, that laughter that seemed to have been forgotten within me. I began to sing alone in my room, singing fearfully, but singing nonetheless. Each melody was a silent prayer of gratitude and liberation. I learned that I didn't need to be defined by what happened to me. Pain wasn't my identity. My true identity lay in the one who loved me unconditionally, Jesus. He transformed my ashes into beauty, my wounds into testimony, my fear into trust. I was no longer just the girl who survived trauma and rejection. I was a daughter of the King, chosen, loved, and protected. Healing, which had previously seemed impossible, became real and tangible. And now, I want to speak directly to those girls and women who feel broken, destroyed, invisible. To you who cry in silence, hidden from everyone, who carry pain that no one sees or understands. I see you. I was you. And I want you to know that you are not alone. Nothing that happened to you is your fault. You did not deserve the pain, the violence, the rejection. No shame, no religious pressure, no fear imposed by traditions or people can erase the truth that you are precious. You are not dirty. You are not ruined. You are deeply loved by a God who weeps with you, who feels your pain, and refuses to abandon you. There were nights when I wanted to disappear, when I no longer knew who I was, when I thought God had rejected me. But then I discovered something too powerful to ignore. Jesus doesn't turn away from the broken. He walks directly into our pain, lifts us up, and envelops us with a love that doesn't demand perfection, doesn't demand masks, doesn't ask for lists of good deeds. He simply welcomes us, calls us sons and daughters, and remains with us. To every Muslim girl who feels doubt, who is afraid to explore the truth, who fears the consequences of following her heart, I've been there too. I was terrified, afraid of being rejected or even hurt, but still, Jesus found me. He came to me through dreams, through scripture, in small whispers of truth that wouldn't let me escape. I want to tell you with all my heart, if you're questioning, if you're searching, it's okay. You're not bad. You're seeking the truth, and there's a God who wants to be found. Jesus didn't come for the perfect, nor for the unattainable. He came for the wounded, the ashamed, for those the world rejects. He didn't shame me. He didn't demand anything from me. He simply called me his daughter. And today, I want the whole world to know what he gave me. Peace, not fear. Love, not judgment. A safe home, not just in this life, but forever. You no longer have to carry the weight of silence. There is hope. There is healing. There is freedom. And it's all found in his name, Jesus. If he could love a girl like me, with all my past and my scars, he can love you too. And to those who hear my testimony and feel their hearts touched, remember, no matter how deep your despair, no matter how difficult the journey, God's love always finds its way to you. He is ready to embrace you, heal your wounds, and transform your pain into light.